Hello and welcome to Bracel's Rewind, the show where I 200 older characters so you don't have to. Today I'll be going over the character I've most wanted to do a rewind on since the series came out, but I didn't have him until now. I'm talking about the original version of Koga, who recently got resurrected, so we'll be taking a look at that one. Now as always, I'm starting off with a normal attack damage build. His resurrected version has a pretty decent attack stat, and he's got a plus 30 bruiser. This resulted in some pretty decent damage, especially when he was in low stamina, since his resurrection link is a low stamina damage boost. This version of Koga also has long reach at 20, but he's an older character, and typically when older characters have long reach, it just makes them have the reach of a regular character. And this kind of matters under this build, because while the damage was high, he was lacking in range. Ordinarily, you can bypass this by having really good range on your strong attacks since you can knock enemies down and then go and attack them, but his strong attacks don't really have the best range. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, but leaving any enemy standing in an inheritance zone means you're gonna struggle to attack, since they're constantly attacking you. In fact, I had to attempt to record this footage several times, because at one point or another they were eventually able to overwhelm Koga. So I'm gonna say this is not a viable build. At least not without linking in with some Senkaiwan Zangetsus, which I don't really use for testing these builds since not everyone can get them. Now next up was a strong attack damage / strong attack recharge build. And believe it or not, making this video was actually the first time I ever used this Koga. So before filming all this, I actually forgot what his strong attacks look like. As I mentioned earlier, they don't have the best range, but it is a lot better than a lot of OG characters, especially for his strong attack 3. In fact, even while chappied, the strong attack 3 was able to take out some enemies on its own, thanks in part to him having frenzy. So you can imagine how good it was under this build. The other two strong attacks were also pretty good, but they definitely had their flaws, in that you had to really line them up in order to get the most of them. It's not really that big a deal if you miss your strong attack 1 and 2 under this build though, since they come back pretty quickly. And you can always use your normal attack, which also isn't terrible for dealing damage under this build, thanks to the decent attack and the bruiser at 30. Overall, it was a pretty good build, and one that I'd say is still usable. Now finally we have the hybrid build, and it should come to no one's surprise that this build is definitely the best. Strong attacks were knocking out enemies left and right, and if I were to miss with my strong attack 1 or 2, my normal attack was more than enough. Unlike the first build, it didn't feel like the enemies were constantly surrounding me since I was able to knock most of them out pretty quickly with the strong attacks, and it didn't really matter how well I lined up the strong attack 1 or 2, since normal attacks are able to pick up the slack. So I am also gonna say this build is viable, but while I wouldn't recommend it, if you were to take this character in co-op, I would actually recommend the previous build over this one, or at least swapping out one of the links with the boosted recharge link, since enemies in co-op won't go down as easily, and you'd want to avoid using normal attacks when going up against large amounts of enemies. I'm glad I was finally able to do a rewind on this character, though I wish they would have given him Havoc and a bit more long reach. Still, for an older character, he can still deal the damage, and he is still a really fun character to use, since he brings with him a bit of a challenge.
私の優雅な舞をお見せしましょう。吸ってください。
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe to the channel, and let me know what other characters you want to see in a rewind.